Hey everybody, it is episode 323.
Welcome back. Today we're talking more about autism, but something even more important. You're going to want to stick around to the end because you are going to love what we have to cover. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Prime Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Skip Wyss. As always, I have the beautiful Dr. Julie Wyss with me today. And Dr. Julie, we're going to be diving into more autism, but not like last week. This one's going to be a little bit more science-y, maybe, but it's going to really, as a parent that listens, and we have a lot of listeners that may or may not have autistic children, but they definitely know somebody who does. And they may think that they have these little neural deflections themselves that show up every now and then. And this is really going to help them understand what's going on with their body and with what's going on with their kid's body.
I think that is sometimes like the resounding line of like, yeah, I've been doing all this for my kid. Now I think I have it too. And I think that's where, again, I mean, and I don't know what we're talking about in full, right? That's how I come into this podcast.
Yep.
But I can guarantee we're going to talk about the brain because the brain controls everything.
Yep.
And that has everything to do with what we do.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the 5 Ds of neural deflection and autism.
Oh,
no, don't even. Yeah, we're not enough Ds going on in our household with our 14-year-old if you catch our drift.
Ds?
Yeah, yep. That's
right.
that child and his
okay.
Ds.
Okay.
All good. So the 5 Ds of autism, the 5 Ds I think of actual development in anyone are really important to understand. And the first one is called dyskinesia. And dyskinesia is movement, kinesiology. If you meet a gym teacher, they're actually a kinesiologist or they have a degree in applied kinesiology. They're not gym teachers.
Well, how the layperson K-tape,
yep,
right?
K-tape.
Because you're not moving how you're supposed to.
It's movement. Yeah, so exactly. So K-tape was designed to help people move through function, move through instability, right? But dyskinesiology or dyskinesia is the lack of motion. And more importantly, it's the lack of motion of the vertebra in your spine. And you've heard us say this on here that half of the nerves that create your spinal cord are for movement, and 60% of those are in your neck. Yep. And the motion of your neck and the motion of those vertebrae are actually designed to relay back to the brain, to feed the brain. And when we have dyskinesia, which is lack of motion, that means that the vertebrae in the spine aren't moving properly. And that's a serious problem because this lack of motion then leads to the body's inability to talk to itself. And that's even more important because think about it this way. If you can't talk to yourself just psychologically, it's very hard for you to think things out. Or you might get into an argument with yourself. Maybe some of you out there.
What the heck are you doing?
Yeah. You might say that I talk to myself way too much. I usually have 4 or 5 conversations going on in my mind at one time. Then you'll hear
I get the end of it and I'm like, what the heck are you talking about?
Or you'll hear a big, like a big sigh or something. And then
I think what's worrisome, like as you're saying that, like I'm thinking of the child population and how many are stuck down like this.
Yep.
So lack of movement.
Lack of movement is huge.
But they don't have that monologue. Right? They're not able to have that conversation with themselves. Or when they finally do, it's an outburst. And then it affects the other people around them.
Well, I had a little guy I was taking care of for a few months that he got to a point where he would tell his parents, I have so much energy, I just want to go out and run around. And we were at a point of a breakthrough. And unfortunately, the breakthrough didn't happen fast enough. So I don't get a chance to see that little guy anymore. But that family's super, super special. And they were amazing patients. But again, the motion, he could recognize it. He could recognize he needed motion. He could recognize he needed exercise to destimulate his brain and actually re-stimulate the brain, which is really awesome. So the next thing we're going to go into is called disafferentation. It's a big word. Afferent input, which is the input back into the brain from your outside world in your body. So afferentation is the input coming back to your brain. It's Afferent is when your body sends out all the communication to all of your cells, but then it needs input back to actually know what's going on. That's called afferent load with an A. Yeah. Okay. Efferent load is exiting the brain. That's going to the cells. That's all we're going to get into. But that afferent input is huge. And this is where cranial nerve comes into. Cranial nerve 10, the vagus nerve. This is something that a lot of people use as marketing. They talk about what happens in the vagus, stays in the vagus, all of these different things. Well, here's what's funny is actually what happens in the vagus doesn't always stay in the vagus.
You don't want it to stay.
No. See, people think the vagus nerve is for autonomic control of the body, which it is, but only 15 to 20% of it is. The other 80% are, do you know what it's actually for? This is just a common question.
What's it for?
It's for communication and sensory back to the brain. Over 80% of the vagus nerve, which is cranial nerve 10, is for sensory. It's not for autonomic control. It's for sensory. But what's even more important for that is that it's for sensation to then learn, know what's going on, and send feedback back to the brain so then the brain knows how to respond. And if it can't get the feedback back, now the brain gets overwhelmed and goes a little crazy. And when we get this disafferentation going on, the first thing we notice to change in your children is balance. And it's the same thing in adults. In fact, adults, when you come in and we do certain tests on you, we check your balance both before and after we stress your nervous system. And the funny thing is when we do our exams at Prime Family Centers, we stress your nervous system and you don't even know we're doing it. We're putting you through different ranges of motion. We're checking your muscle strength. We might be doing some sensation on your arms. Not might. Everybody gets that. We're looking at range of motion. All of these simple everyday tasks that you do should not stress your nervous system. And what I find amazing is that when we put you through these little things in our exams, it stresses your nervous system out, and the first thing that fails is your balance.
And do you know what the struggle is here? Is that, so if we switch this to talk to the adult population, that under that little bit of stress and you already can't walk that straight line, what happens? I'm not saying none of our viewers, none of our listeners are ever going to drive while they've been drinking. But that is like a setup that if you would ever get pulled over and asked to do that when your nervous system is already stressed, you are never going to pass that.
You're already driving impaired.
Right?
You are. You're going through life impaired.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so people are like, I would never drink and drive, but we're going through our daily life like this, not fully connected, like we have been drinking.
Well, okay, so let's just talk about that for a minute. People that drink all the time are alcoholics. And at one point in alcoholism, you can become what they call a functioning alcoholic, which means that you can function through life while drinking and still seem to be normal. Well, guess what? You are a functioning, dysregulated being when you're subluxated and out of balance. And the reason why you're functioning is because you're going through life thinking that everything around you is normal and people are perceiving you as normal. But when we start actually testing functional neurological tests and you fail test after test after test, and one of the big ones is checking your balance, you're a functioning alcoholic. You are a functioning impaired being. And that's not okay because your body's completely compensated to something that's foreign to the body, which is the vertebra getting out of position.
It's so serious.
Yeah, and I'm impassioned about this because this is what we see in everyone's life. It's just that in some children, we see it manifest itself into autism. Or we see this at the end game of autism, ADD, ADHD, all of these neuro deflections, where if we can get these proper communication chains back and change that balance. The other thing is there's this thing called nociception, which is noise. So now we get this excess noise in the brain because we don't have the right communication. And now the brain starts going crazy and it can't do normal tasks. So what happens then is the brain exhausts itself. Have you ever heard your child when they're really, really little? Parents will say this with a colicky kid. They cry and cry and cry themselves into exhaustion and then they just pass out. Your brain does the same thing. It communicates and communicates and communicates, trying to get communication back in, saying what's going on, and it never gets it back. It's exhausted. So then what do we have to do? We have to stimulate it with a pill or some sort of stimulant, caffeine, I don't care what it is, to get the brain to start functioning normally
to show
again.
some livelihood.
Exactly. We cattle prod it, give it a little shock. That's not okay. So we need the brain to be able to stimulate and work with itself, and that's where motion comes in. So when we get this change in balance, we get this change in noise going on in the brain, we get this change in our ability to stay upright and move, and coordination is off. Now we have a problem, right? So then what that leads to then is what we call dysautonomia, which is a complete change in how the organ systems function. This is where parents will see this, and this is where they get extremely worried.
These are the big symptom ones.
It is, but then everybody talks about this, that's the vagus nerve. No, the vagus nerve is early on in this, and if all we're going to try to do is do these things where we twist our ears and do this and try to stimulate our vagus nerve, the vagus nerve needs communication back for stimulation. It's sensory driven. It's sensory driven. So we need to really hold space for that and get that. Like, it's a neurosensory disorder.
Sorry, I'm just hung up on like I really people are actually doing that. It's so out of like their scope. It's not like all of a sudden, okay, I need a surgery. I'm going to go in and do it myself. And that's where I think that's the struggle with sometimes like these groups of, families or moms looking for support. And it's like, well, maybe I saw somebody do it. Well, here, now I know how to do it, or somebody showed me how to do it. And it's just like the game of telephone that, like, and we talked about the last episode of copying a piece of paper. It changes. And just how like you did it for your child doesn't mean it's right for that next child. And so that's where there needs to be more pieces of this looked at. There needs to be more than one resource that you're using to be able to help your child.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually comes back into this next part, because what this leads to then is when we have dysautonomia, we get dysbiosis. And dysautonomia is our body's autonomic nervous system not working properly, which is how we breathe, how our heart rate is, how we digest food, how we excrete, how we salivate, how we go to the bathroom and poop. So we see all these changes in dysautonomia, and then we get dysbiosis, which is a massive change in gut function. And what I'm coming back to is your point there, where parents and everything, they'll start talking to each other, and the first thing they want to do is clean up the gut.
Which is great. That's
understandable.
A great thought.
We need to clean up the gut, but we're kind of putting the cart before the horse, where we're cleaning up the gut. But what actually controls, what's the master control of the gut? That's a big thing. And sometimes the gut is wore out, so we have to bring medicine in, and we have to work on getting the gut cleared out and things like that. Like, there are stages and places for all of this, but if we start way ahead of the ball game, if we already start 50 yards downfield when we're supposed to start at the 10, we're already off sides. We're not working in the right direction. We may
need to start at the top.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. No, start at the top. Yeah. Right. You start at the top and work your way down, above, down, inside out. It's how the brain works. And this dysbiosis is the gut stuff that the kids talk about, that parents talk about, and they try to regulate the gut. So then they eliminate dairy, they eliminate wheat, they eliminate all of these different things, which rightfully so should be taken out. Like, that stuff can be taken out, and there's other things that are needed for nutrition as well. But they clean all this stuff up, but they never took it, and nobody ever talked to them about everything leading up to that.
Yeah, so you take the stuff out with the hope that then the tummy, the gut, the digestive system will start to work. But again, the brain is what controls the stomach and the digestion. So that's great to prep it to get all that stuff taken out, but ultimately we still need to come to the top to make sure, when we're talking the vagus, that the brain can then talk to the vagus, so then that stomach can begin to heal and to do all that.
And when the stomach is off, the brain is off. When the brain is off, the stomach is off. That's where we talk about the gut being the second brain, with bacterial load in there, and how it makes up roughly 10% of a child's body weight. It makes up about 5% of an adult's body weight. So we really need to understand that and how that gut regulates itself, but the nervous system is what controls those bacteria. What happens then is it leads to something called dyskinesis, and that's a reversible neurological disorder where the brain's not communicating to the body properly, and it's actually reversible. And then after that's around long enough, now the child becomes disconnected. And the disconnect is, now we're on our phones, now we're in our iPhones, now we're looking to stimulus from electronics or things in front of us versus stimulus and human interaction. And that's what kind of the story in 5Ds of autism neuro deflection happens. But one of the biggest things that we need to understand here is now that we know that, how do we go about helping that?
It can be super overwhelming
It
and
is.
alienating
But,
and confusing.
But Dr. Julie, what do you think is the simplest way to help that though?
Chiropractic.
Exactly. Yeah. So is getting that nervous system back to communicating properly. And yeah, I'm super passionate about this stuff. Like, but this is something in our world of Prime Family Chiropractic Centers, we see a lot of children with neurodeflective issues, but it's not always autism, or it's not oppositional defiance disorder, or ADD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
There doesn't have to be a label.
No.
And I feel no matter what stage of life that we're in, with the outside stressors, our body is constantly being taxed. And that's where these things can all of a sudden just creep up. But that's where, like, within our model, the focus that we take with the brain-based approach, that just means that everybody can be helped.
They can be, and that's the same thing with adults as well. Like, everybody has an all-encompassing family-focused care, because we need to look at the whole family. And if one child has some sort of neuro issue, whether it's autism or all these other different alphabets that they get put on them and labeled with, that affects the whole family.
Right.
And we say this all the time when we're talking with our patients and our families, but families that get care together, heal together, thrive together, and they're happy together, versus just the one getting the care and no one else getting the care as well, because it's just as stressful on the mom and the dad as it is on the child.
Absolutely.
It's really hard. And we talked about this with kids with colic. We've talked about it with digestive issues. We talk about it a lot. And in fact, me and you talk about relationships all the time with our patients and on this podcast, where those relationships are key. But if there's something really holding up that relationship and driving a stress in between it, that relationship gets put on the back burner, and that affects everybody.
Well, and it's so much easier to also understand of, like, oh, you got adjusted today. This is how I'm feeling. This is how I'm functioning. Or for everybody to be able to relate that if somebody's attitude is off, or if you maybe haven't had a bowel movement, or your tummy isn't working, or you have a headache, to then realize, to be able to actually say that out loud, to realize, oh, I do need to get adjusted, or I need to see my pediatric chiropractor. It just makes it that much, it's fun, right? It's that much more fun to watch each other. And like, some of our families are like, oh, you're really noisy, and you've got farted on today. But for the family to be able to enjoy that together, to come as a family unit, just means that they're all in it together and they want to see each other's successes.
Yeah, they want everybody to be happy. Yeah. And like, that's all I want from my family, my kids, my wife. I just want people happy. I want them to be happy. I want them to be healthy. I want them to get through life without problems and injury and hurt. Nobody likes to see other people hurting. If you actually have a soul, like, that's not what you want to see happen. But you also want solutions. And when you don't have the education to think of the solution yourself, you either seek it out and learn it, or you have to turn to a professional that has the extra education to help you seek it out. But even more importantly, provide the community and the support you need, so you don't feel like you're on an island. Even when you had an adult with low back pain, you feel like you're on an island, because there's nobody around at that time that has the same issues as you. But really, if we step back, there's a lot of people around with the same issues as you, but they're still seeking the same results using the same old, outdated, antiquated treatments, instead of actually looking at the body as a whole and restoring communication. That's the key.
And that's, you don't know what you don't know, but that's also why we do this podcast. So our hope is that you no longer don't know what you don't know, right? You have the resources, and I can guarantee that you listening right now, you know somebody who has a child that is autistic or has the label, or you yourself that you're suffering with all the different things. And to realize, just what we talked about last podcast, not every chiropractor is just like the other chiropractor. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, I tried that at one point. Well, let me tell you, try it again, because now that you have the information, you're armed with the different tools and resources that you can empower yourself, or you can empower the other person who doesn't know yet and is struggling.
So if you're out there listening right now, and let's say you're in Green Bay, or you're around in Wisconsin, or even throughout the United States, don't hesitate to reach out to us here at Prime Family Centers. We can try to help you find where you need to go. Our number is, what is our number?
920-781-8228.
So 920-781-8228. You can hit us up, info@primefamilycenters.com. Leave in the comments if you would like to help. Comment autism, ADD, whatever you want to get our attention. We will reach out and see if we can help you, or at least give you some ideas as to what can be done to help your family's health even more and more. We are on a mission to reach over 1,000 subscribers this year. We want to get there. We're slowly chipping away. But we need your help. We need you to share this. We need you to give us a thumbs up, and we need you to subscribe. So everybody, we really appreciate you on again today. I hope that these 5 Ds of autism and neurodeflections actually help you understand what's going on with your child, but even more importantly, maybe just what's going on with yourself. Even if you're dealing with other things, you don't always have to have what we're talking about, but we can definitely help you out. So, Dr. Julie, got anything else? All right, everybody, go out there. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.